All right, so we're going to solve one-step equations. Okay, so we have to do all of these steps to build up the backbone because we're going to get to some pretty intense equations, and I want us to have a good foundation. So this is like learning how to hit a baseball from a T-ball stand. You have to start there to build up the blocks before you can get to hitting homers, okay? So the whole point of solving equations is to get the variable alone. So we are trying to get the variable alone. Okay, so that's the whole point. Try to get the variable alone. Okay, so step one is always to draw the river. I'm sure you've heard of the river before. It's when we just draw a line down the equal sign. After we do that, then we identify what operation. So we identify what operation is happening in the problem. Is it addition, subtraction, multiplication, division? And we want to do the opposite operation. Do the opposite operation. What's important to remember is what we do to one side. So what we do to one side of the equal sign, we have to do to the other. So what we do to one side of the, I'm missing words here, of the equal sign, okay, erase, sorry, oh gosh. What do we do to one side of the equal sign? The equal sign, we do to the other. And that's going to make more sense when we get to it. And then our last step is to always simplify our answer. Okay, so looking at example 1, we are going to draw the river. So what I meant by that is we're going to draw lines down from the equal sign. Okay, so that gives us a clear distinction. There's one side and here's the other side, right? So it gives us a clear distinction. Here's one side, here's the other side. Okay, so what operation is happening on this side? Well, there's that plus sign there, right? So what's the opposite of adding? The opposite of adding is subtracting. So we're going to subtract 5, not just on this side, but the other side as well. Because remember, what we do to one side, we have to do to the other. Okay, and then after we subtract them, these 5s cancel out. They go away. Okay, and remember, the whole point is to get this x alone. So now that these are canceled, our x comes down, and its x equals, what is 13 minus 5? 13 minus 5 is a positive 8. So then this is our answer. Okay? All right, so now let's look at example 2. So first things first, we draw our river. So remember, that comes from the equal sign. It goes around, just so we can differentiate between one side and the other. And remember, the whole point is to get x alone. Okay, the whole point is to get our variable alone. We have an operation here. We have a plus sign. So we need to do the opposite operation. So the opposite of adding is subtracting 4/5. And what we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So we're subtracting 4/5 on both sides. They cancel out, which means we're left with in x, we just bring our equal sign down the river. And then 4 minus 4/5. That's what we would do in our calculator. 4 minus 4/5. And that would give us 3 and 1/5. And now that's our answer. All right. So I want you to pause and I want you to try example 3 for me. I want you to pause and try example 3. All right, so hopefully you got negative 10.36. Okay, if not, check in your calculator that you put a negative 8.1 minus 2.6. All right, so now we're going to jump to example 4. Okay, example 4. So remember, we always start by drawing our river. Identify what operation is being used. In this case, it's a subtraction sign. What's the opposite of subtracting? The opposite of subtracting is adding. Is adding 3 to both sides, which again cancels out these 3's. The x gets brought down. The equal sign flows down our river. And we have negative 4 plus 3. So remember, opposite signs, subtract and keep the sign of the bigger. So it's really 4 minus 3, which is 1. 4 was negative, so it's a negative 1. And that's our answer. So now that we've seen an example with subtraction, I want you to try example 5 and 6. So pause and try example 5 and 6. All right, so check your 2 answers for example 5 and 6. Check your work. We're going to keep on going down to example 7. Down to example 7 and 8. Okay, so looking at example 7, again, draw the river. What operation is happening here? What operation is happening in between this 4 and the x? Technically, there's a multiplication symbol there, right? So what's the opposite of multiplying? That's division. So dividing both sides by 4. So the opposite of multiplication is division, which means these 4's cancel, which means my x gets brought down, my equal sign gets brought down, and then this is what we would do in our calculator. Negative 32 divided by 4, and that's going to be negative 8. Okay. Now we're going to do example 8 together, because this one's a little tricky. It's got a fraction in it. The fraction doesn't really change anything. It works the same way. We draw our river. Again, we know in between the 1/4 and the x is a multiplication. So that tells me I'm dividing both sides by negative 1/4. Dividing by negative 1/4. Okay, make sure you're writing these exactly how I'm writing them. Okay, because form really matters. We use that division bar. Remember, we don't write this division. That's for younger students, which are not you. Okay, so we use that division bar, that fraction bar. Okay, which means that these negative 1/4 cancel. My x gets brought down. My equal sign gets brought down. And now I'm doing in my calculator negative 20 divided by negative 1/4. Okay, and when you do that in your calculator, you should get 80 as your answer. So again, do this in your calculator, and if you do it right, you should get this. Okay. Next one. Example 9. We start with drawing the river. And then we have division here. That fraction bar, remember, means division. What's the opposite of dividing? Multiplication. So we multiply both sides by what's in that denominator. Multiply both sides with what's in that denominator. So then these cancel. Our x gets brought down. Our river comes down. And then what's 10 times 3? That's going to be 30. Okay, I want you to pause and try example 10 on your own. All right, hopefully when you tried that on your own, you got x equals 20. If you didn't, let me know and we could talk about it. So make sure you ask questions in class if you don't understand something.